out of the port and we're coming up Station Hill now. And we take a left, watch out for the cars as you can probably hear, take a left at the Rose and Crown pub, which is a nice place to stay as well as get something to eat. And then you cross over the road just after the pub, watch out for the traffic again, walk up the hill a little way, and then you're about to get onto the pilgrim route. When you cross over the road, there is the Glendower Hotel. Go up to the right, just after the Glendower Hotel, up a path where there's a handrail and some steps. There's a stream burbling down, and you're now on Pilgrim's Way. There's a little house with Pilgrim's Way written on it, so you know you're on the right way to start. So you've finished your journey over from Ireland, and you're now on the Wales leg of the Wexford-Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way. So we've climbed up the hill from Goodwick, and we're just about to drop down into the hamlet of Llanunda. We come to a crossroads, and just before you walk across the crossroads, just look back to your left, because there's a stone buried into the bank, into the hedge. This is a really important stone because it's a medieval, maybe even very early medieval pilgrim marker. And it's hard to see because there's lichens or lichens all over it, but it's a double cross, a cross within a cross. And that's to tell the pilgrims who came this way that they were on the right road to St David's. It's very hard to make out, but in Llanunda Church in St Gwyndaf's, there's another one that's clearly another pilgrim marker that's been found somewhere else from around here, that's been relaid into the wall of the church when it was rebuilt. So let's go down and have a look. So we're just coming down into Llanunda to St Gwyndaf's Church, and I love this church. It's a very, very old one. It goes right back to probably the 6th century again. What else I really like about this place? There's two things. Actually, no, there's three things. One is St Gwyndaf himself. He was probably from Brittany. He somewhat dispels the myths of the age of the saints and the holy men. You tend to think of them as deeply pious and spiritual men, which I'm sure they were to a degree. But one of the other great stories about him is that he had a fist fight with St Aidan over who got the right to name a well nearby. So the two of them stood up to each other and had a fist fight. All the Irish friends listening to this will be very pleased to know that the Irish Saint Aidan won, so St Gwyndaf went off in a huff. The second thing is that this was a place that became very important in 1797. It was because this was the place that the last invasion of Britain happened. The French invaders, who were from revolutionary France in 1797, landed just down the coast from here at Carrigwastad Point, came up the hill, where we'll be going down shortly, and stole their way into the church and used the Bible for kindling and broke up some of the pews and made a fire. Let's see if the church is open. It is. Let's go in. It's had a Victorian refit, as a lot of the churches did around here, but there are real hints of the past, the Celtic past. This is a very old church. It's a place that resonates with the story of the 1798 rebellion that happened in Ireland, because you can't understand what happened in this church in 1797 without understanding the Irish rebellion in 1798. The United Irishmen had been inspired by the French and the American revolutions. They were looking to get rid of British control in Ireland. In 1797, the French landed here as a diversionary tactic to draw British troops away from Ireland. The full-blown rebellion took place in 1798, but the opening shots were sort of here. Sort of didn't work because in February of 1797, the landings that took place just down the coast from here were put down within a couple of days. But before they were defeated and surrendered, they came to this church. On the right-hand side of the church by the windows, there is a wooden cabinet with a glass top, and inside it is a Welsh language Bible. And the Bible has singed pages within it. And the reason that they're singed is that the French soldiers used the Bible for kindling, and some of the pews for kindling as well, to set a fire because they were cold and they were trying to get a night's sleep after they'd landed here. So the remains of the Bible are here in Welsh. This was one of those examples of a very early 1620 Bible. Often in Wales we forget the wider connection to the Irish part of that story. We see it as the last invasion of Britain, and actually it was all about Ireland. Going back outside the church now, I'll just make sure I close the door. There we go, and thank you local parishioners for keeping it open for pilgrims to look at. If you take a left outside the church after coming out and walk round to the other side of the church, as you look back on yourself by a window just before the end, there is another double cross in the wall, because that must be a much older pilgrim marker that's taken from one of the walls near here. Otherwise it makes no sense to be halfway up a wall of a church. And then if you look down by the drain pipe and the window, there is an even older face with a cross above it, like a saltire cross, and that must be very, very old, from the age of the saints, probably again from the 6th or 7th century. So this is a really old church that's been rebuilt and knocked about, but there are little hints of the Celtic past all in the walls. And if you go around the very end of the church, you'll see another cross that's got a great history to it. As we come back out of the churchyard and the gate and go back up the concrete path, if you go back towards the farm and take a right, and that will bring you down to the coast path again. But before you do get there, there's a little clump of trees just before a telegraph pole. Before you get to the cottage, go into the clump of trees on your left and you'll find Llanunda Holy Well, which is a really wonderful atmosphere to it. Very, very ancient well, and it's been lovingly restored. This is a healing well, and you know it's a healing well because there's a chair that you can sit in. And the water would probably have been at higher level at some point, but I'm sitting down in it now, and you could have bathed your feet above a capstone, and inside there's the water. Beautiful place. People would have come here for healing, and the water runs down a channel that snakes around, that probably joins a little stream that goes towards the sea. And in the late spring, early summer, it's a riot of colour with all the flowers that are around here. It is a beautiful place to come, and one of those holy wells that really grabs your spirit, grabs your soul, and you just want to sit here for a moment amongst the trees and contemplate. So we're just coming up to the lookout point near Strumble Head that was a World War II observation point, but now it's used for observing wildlife. And today there are guillemots, there are porpoises, the seals. It's an amazing place. So we're just going to walk in and have a look and see what we can find. So it's a bit echoey in here now, but we'll just go up and have a look. So there are a group of nature spotters here with large cameras. You might be able to see what's going on.
Just landed just straight out. It's not diving. You can also, what we're doing for Sea Trust Wales is a charity. We're volunteering. We're part of a porpoise ID project survey.
Oh, right, okay.
So we do this several times a week, and we see porpoise. We photograph them if we can, and try and identify what they are. But we'll also see common dolphins and Risso's dolphins sometimes.
Really? Yeah.
We have been seeing a lot more common dolphins. So, and then you've got lots of grey seals, Atlantic grey seals, and lots of breeding birds, guillemots, razorbills, shags, cormorants. got gannets. It's a very good site, Strumblehead, for bird watching, which we're trying to get more protection for. The main concern from Sea Trust point of view is the marine conservation and making sure that boat owners and boat trips, but also fishermen and everyone are sort of working together to reduce plastic going into the sea.
So many different bird noises here, aren't there?
Yeah, a lot of those are young guillemots wanting to be fed. I think they're being made to fend for themselves.
We were just round the other side of Strumblehead now, and we noticed some oyster catchers, and was it a chough as well that we heard here?
Yeah, chough are very iconic birds here. They breed here. We get kestrel, buzzard flying past sometimes.
Good luck with the wildlife spotting, and it was the
Sea Trust Wales.
Yeah,
it's a local marine conservation charity that's trying to do its best to protect this area and education and research.
Brilliant.
Oh, what was that? That must have been a seal just doing a bit of a breach. Oh, it was. Gosh, that came right out of the water. Can you see it? It's got something in its mouth. It obviously caught something.
So there's a seal just down there.
Oh yeah, look at the seal just here. There's a seal just down there. Look.
Oh yes.
It's coming right into the coast.
We were at Mackerel Point and a seal had this most enormous fish right underneath us, was eating it.
Wow.
And it was getting the vicious creatures, seals are. It was getting a mouthful and really ripping it, and this poor fish was still flapping.
Oh no.
And eventually there was just a bit of body and a tail left, and a gull nicked it off the seal.
Really?
And got it back. It's like watching a wildlife soap opera.
Yeah. A wildlife soap opera. I like that.
It's you see all these little dramas going on.
We're at Strumblehead Lighthouse. I like to think of this place as a place where the light shines out to guide people, like with the ships, people who were lost at sea. And in a pilgrimage sense, it's about maybe in your life you might be a little bit lost and you need a bit of guidance, and you need to sort of think about where you're heading. And sometimes a light like this going out is just a nice sort of symbolism. And I've got a little blessing here as well, just called light. May your light shine out to reach those at sea who have lost their way. May your light shine out to reach those at sea without hope. May your light shine out to reach those drifting towards hidden rocks. May your light shine out to guide us to the safe haven of your love. As you come up from the coast path past the Pulthdary Youth Hostel, you come out onto the road and take a right. But just before you do, take a little detour where it says Pulthdary Holiday Cottages and just wander up there, because there's something amazing. You go past a boat that's tucked up on a grassy bank, past some beautiful holiday cottages, which are busy during the summer months and a bit quieter in the winter. And there's a sign for the public footpath. Just before that, there's a bench, and there are some steps leading up to a hermit's cell, which is from probably the 6th century or around then. Just wander in, you can experience what it was like to be a hermit. And you can actually squeeze in just about. It's a bit damp. It's a tiny entrance, but once you're in, it's actually quite large. You can stand up, and it just makes me think about what these Celtic monks must have been like, these hermits who came to be in the Celtic equivalent of the Egyptian desert, the desert fathers and mothers who wanted a life of solitude and came to wild places like this. My eyes are getting used to it, and I can see little gaps, chinks of light coming through the rocks. And it must have been a fairly bleak existence, but I think if people were trying to get away from civilization and to get closer to God through solitude and prayer, this would have been the sort of place. And it's remarkable that these hermit cells still exist. I don't know of any other around here. It's well worth a little detour off the path. And you have to scramble to get back out again into the daylight. There we go. Amazing. And just above us is Garnvower. On top of that, there's a large Iron Age settlement with commanding views right down to Carnliddy, where we're heading. One of the things that is so distinctive and wonderful about this pilgrimage is how art has been inspired here by the landscape and the seascape, both in Wales with its poetry and storytelling, and in Ireland with its music and storytelling as well. So those bardic traditions between the two countries bring them together and make this special. So here we are at Pwllderry, and we just come off the path, and there's a monument 7 feet high to Dewi Emrys, who was a very famous poet who died in 1952. He wrote a very, very famous poem in Welsh here called Pwllderry, and it's about the effects of the landscape and the seascape here. I'm just looking out towards Carntlidi and Penberry in the distance. It's very still now. It was quite windy and rainy earlier. It's cleared. So peaceful and beautiful. His poem is evocative of the whole landscape around here. Ailsa Richardson is an artist, a poet and a pilgrim, and she is going to narrate the Welsh poems and goes on later to perform some of her own poetry for us.
Rhawn ni'n eistedd dwe uwchben Pwllderry, hyn gatre'r erir a'r arth a'r bwci. Stardinion taliedd fan côn y dre, ddim yn llefeleth mor wyllt yw'r lle. All ffrwlyn y cownter a'r brethyn ffansi, ddim cadw I drad uwchben Pwllderry. Rach chi'n sefyll fri uwchben y dwnsiwn a drichyd lawr I hen grochon dwfn. A hwn yn berwi rhwng creigiau llwydon, fel stwceidio lath neu olchon sebon. Mae meddwl amdano'r funud hon yn hala rhyw isgryd trwy fy mron.
Yesterday, sitting above Pwllderry, where eagles lived once, and bears and bogies, I thought those streetwise people down by here have no idea it's so wild up here. The shop-counter dandy with his tweed so fancy couldn't keep his footing above Pwllderry. You stand up high above this dungeon, looking down at a bottomless cauldron, boiling between the greyish crags like churns full of milk or foaming suds. Just thinking of it this very minute makes a ghost walk on my heart.
Just dropped down into Melyn Trigwynt, which is a woolen mill that was originally powered by a water wheel, which we can hear in a moment. The wheel is turning. But in more recent times, the mill was powered by electricity. They're recalibrating the machines at the moment. This is a place that knits, or weaves rather, traditional Welsh blankets that are highly prized and are sold in posh stores around the country. One of the interesting things about this place is, apart from its wonderful cafe that serves amazing cowl, is the fact that the mill has been in family ownership since about 1912. It goes back a few hundred years before then actually, but it's been in a family ownership since 1912, and the current owners are getting on a bit, and they could have sold it and made quite a lot of money, but actually they've made the decision to hand it over in a partnership to the people who work here, the employees. A very forward-thinking, wonderful thing to do actually, so it really commits everyone to make the place work. That's Melyn Trigwynt. It's a lovely place to start the day on the second day of the walk in Wales, or to end the day on the first day. Jess Ward is a wonderful Welsh harpist and performs down by the sea for us, as well as the music that you hear at the start and end of each audio clip in the guide. we've just come down through Abercastle Harbour and walked along the side of the harbour and then up round to the left and then up some fairly brutal steps. Just take a left after that through a gate and then come up to Carrig Samson. This is an amazing Neolithic monument at Cromlech. If you look back round your left shoulder, you can see right over to Garnvower, and the view from the Cromlech commands a beautiful vista over the sea to the headland. It is a massive capstone. It's a large area underneath, you can stand inside. The story is that the capstone, which I'm just touching now, was put here by the little finger of Saint Samson. Samson was the famous saint in the 6th century who was the second abbot of Coldy Island and also Samson of Dole in Brittany, so he was quite a famous guy. I don't think he could have lifted this capstone with his little finger, even if he was a powerful holy man. The main reason for that is that this has been here probably about 4,000 years, predating Samson some 2,500 years.
Walter Williams wrote this contemplating a Cromlech. Cromlech made him start thinking about previous times and those that have gone before us. It's written in Welsh, so I'm going to read it mostly in Welsh and then I'll give you a little translation. It's called Remembering, Cofio. Un funud fach cyn elo'r hael o'r wybren. Un funud fwyn cyn delo'r hwyr i'w hynt. I gofio am y pethau angofiedig. A'r goll yn awr yn llwch yr amser gynt. Ewyn ton a dir ar draethell unig, fel can y gwynt, lle nid oes glist a glew. Mi yw'n ei bod yn galw'n ofer arnom, hyn bethau angofiedig dynol rhyw. Camp a chelfyddyd ac yn hedloedd cynnar, aneddau bychain a neaddau mawr, a chwedlau cain a chwalwyd ers canrifoedd, y diwiau na wyr neb amdanynt nawr. Mynych ymrig yr hwyr am ei yn unig, daw hiraeth am eich nafod chwi bob un, a oesach deil o hyd mewn cof a chalon, hyn bethau angofiedig teulu dyn. So he is talking about the end of day. He's writing that it's the end of day, so he's talking about the sun setting, that quiet time before the sun sets, and he brings to mind the people that have gone before. He talks about the landscape, like the white foam of waves on lonely beaches, like the wind's song when there is none to hear. I know that they are calling to us, vainly, the old forgotten things we once held dear. And he talks about the loss of the language as well, about language of peoples that we no longer hear, gods that have long gone that we don't understand anymore, and kind of previous beliefs. And then at the end, he's talking about sitting here as the dusk comes, and do heart and memory somewhere still hold you, you old forgotten things of humankind. Melyn Trefin, by William Williams, known as Croes. Nid yw'r felyn henon mali, yn refin y min y môr. Trodd y merlin o laf adre, dan ei bŵn o drothwyr ddôr. Ac mae rhod fi gynt yn rhygni, ac yn chwyrnu drwy y fro. Pan farw'n hen felynydd wedi rhoi ei olaf dro. Rhed y ffrwd garedig eto, gyda thalcen noeth y tŷ, ond ddaw ned i'r fal a'i farlus, hen olwen fawr nithri. Lle dôl gwenydd gwyn Llanrian, derfyn haf yn llwythu cras, ni cheir mwy ond tres a wymon, gydag ambell ffrwynen las. Segur fain sy'n gwylio'r fangre, yn y curlaw mawr ar gwynt, dilythyren garreg goffa o'r amseroedd difyr gynt. Ond oes yma neb yn malu, namryn amser swrth ar hun, wrth i'n chwalu ac yn malu Mari'r felin yn Rhefin.
And this is the English translation of the mill at Trevine. Tonight the mill at Trevine that stands beside the foam grinds nothing. The last pony has borne its last load home. The grating wheel whose grumbles once filled the country round stopped when the old miller died. Tonight it makes no sound. The kindly stream still running beside the mill's bare brow turns the big old wheel no more. None bring their barley now. Where white wheat from Llanrhian lay heaped at summer's close, now seaweed trails and only the scattered green rush grows. The idle stone keeps vigil in wind and driving rain, unlettered monument to days that will not come again. For nothing now is ground here, yet time and weather still graft on their grim labour and grind down Trevine Mill. We're coming down into Porthgain now. It's a very unusual place. The first thing that strikes you when you come down into the harbour is what appears to be a huge castle on the other side of the harbour until you look a bit more closely and you realise it's made out of brick. What this actually is the remnants of part of Pembrokeshire's industrial past, in that this was a brickworks. And just walk down towards the harbour now. There's a beautiful stone harbour with some fishing boats, a full restaurant called The Shed, which is just down on the quayside. It does really wonderful fish and chips. And then round to the side of The Shed is a series of galleries. Again, a hint to the importance of art to this local area. We walk back out onto the other side of the harbour and up some steps by a white stone building and carry on up to the top where the stone was actually quarried and used in the brickworks. The quarry was used until about 1910, when it was deliberately blasted open and the sea was let in, and it created the blue lagoon that people now swim in. As you come over the headland, you descend to the beach at Aberystwyth, which is pebbles at the top with cars parked along, and then there's a sandy beach, and you can probably hear the waves coming in. Just below you, as you go on the path down into Aberystwyth, you'll see the remains of the quarrymen's cottages that are just in ruins. And then down to the left, there's a little toilet block if you need the loos, or you can turn right and go over the stepping stones onto the beach, and then back on the footpath on the other side up the hill towards Carnliddy.
I was very much thinking about the people that had walked routes in advance of me. Behind me, on my heels, a great crowd gathering, not clamouring, simply walking in my wake, calmly. My many great upon great grandparents and the forebears of this land gathering. Trees long gone, regrowing in my tracks. Generation upon generation of bracken of every species that has lived here. Alexanders stretching back to Roman times. Seals rolling in a remembered ocean. Ravens conjured from time itself. A surge of bodies forward, the waves wake, carrying me as one, walking me into being the best ancestor I can become.
And now I can see Carntliddy to my left, and I'm just coming round to St David's Head. This is an amazing spot because on the very tip of the peninsula there's a Bronze Age and Iron Age settlement that you can still just about see a wall that goes across the length of the peninsula. Ptolemy wrote about this area and wrote about the people who lived here, and it's a tribe that also he noted existed over in Ireland as well. So the connections between Ireland and Wales were very strong all the way back to Ptolemy and beyond. Just a bit further round from here is a cromlech called Coton Arthur, and a little bit further round under the base of Carntliddy is another cromlech, a smaller one, and near the wartime lookout points that were looking for submarines and planes and ships going up the Irish Sea. Carntliddy, just to my left, is a really important hill, and legend has it that this is the place that St Patrick sat and was visited by an angel as he looked over to Ireland across the Irish Sea, and the angel said, "Don't get too comfy here, you've got to go back to Ireland and you've got to bring Christianity to Ireland." Christianity was already there for some time before Patrick with people like St Declan, but we won't go into that detail. But certainly Patrick had a huge impact in Ireland, and this is where it started. Just below the summit there's a sofa-like stone called Eisteddfod Porrig, Patrick's seat. This is apparently the spot where he saw the angel, and it's a really good place to sit and to look out over the sea and to think about what decisions in life lie ahead for us, as Patrick did all those years ago back in the 5th century. So I've just come down off the coast path from St David's Head down towards White Sands, and you might be able to hear the waves breaking on the shore in the distance. I'm just coming down onto the pebbly beach, goes into the sandy beach, and to my left is a fairly nondescript mound of earth topped with some fence poles and wire fence telling me to keep out. This is the site of St Patrick's Chapel, and has been the location of excavations over the past 2 or 3 years. Dyfed Archaeological Trust have been organising it, and they found the most remarkable chapel from probably as far back as about the 7th century. It was all covered in sand. A few years ago there were some fairly big storms, and the graveyard around the outside of the chapel was exposed and bones were starting to get washed out into the sea, so they knew they had to do something, and so they've been looking at the remains there of the chapel. So they found lots of stone walls, they found kissed burial sites, they found skeletons of a lot of people and incredibly a lot of children. This is a very important site. It's probably the place where, when the pilgrims came across the Irish Sea and the monks travelling between Ireland and Wales, they would have landed here. It would have looked quite different then, not quite so sandy, and they would have given thanks in the chapel for a safe journey, because it was a very perilous journey. Saint Patrick may have gone from here, hence the name of the chapel. St David and St Aidan would have travelled here. dropping down onto the beach. You can probably hear the seagulls and the waves. I'm going to walk along the beach and carry on round to St Justinian's. So we're just taking a little diversion after coming off White Sands Beach, and we're going up the hill. We go past a little static caravan site and carry on a little bit further, about another 100 metres or so, and on your left hand side there's an aluminium gate going into a field. Just on the opposite side, on the right hand side as you go up the hill, about no more than 10 metres, 15 metres after that, on the right hand side, tucked away, almost invisible with the undergrowth around it, is St Aidan's Well. It's a bit of a sorry state actually. You can just see it. It's a semicircular well, but it's all overgrown. There doesn't look to be any water in it. It's quite soggy underfoot. There's a lot of ferns and brambles around it. I was talking to someone about this and they said that it might well have been that the well supply was affected by the golf club that was just built behind it, but no one really knows. It probably would have been a place that after a long sea journey on the way up to St David's, they would have had a drink of water and maybe give thanks after going to St Patrick's Chapel down on White Sands. Worth having a look at because of its connection with St Aidan. I'm just coming down into St Justinian's, and he was a contemporary with St David, and in fact we'll encounter him again in St David's Cathedral because there is an icon of him just behind the shrine to St David. He was a character apparently. The story is he was on Ramsey Island, he had his head cut off, but that didn't stop him coming back to the mainland. He picked up his head and walked with it over to the mainland. He probably didn't use the RNLI lifeboat station. I think he was a bit beyond that, but there are two ramps here that go down into the sea because this is quite a busy stretch for the RNLI. In fact, there is a delightfully named section of seawater here called the Bitches, and it's named that because it's such a dangerous stretch of water to navigate your way through. So that's St Justinian's. Just across from the car park is another ruined Celtic chapel. It's just another one of those little Celtic chapels that seem to pop all around here. Drop down into Porthclais, which in medieval times would have been the main harbour for St David's. In the earlier Celtic period, White Sands Bay was probably where people landed from Ireland and elsewhere, but that silted up over time, and then Porthclais was established. At high tide you can land quite large boats in here. The other thing that's really interesting about Porthclais is that it's the second of the hidden holy wells. So if you just come back onto the road from the bottom of the harbour, there's a wooden shed on the right, a green wooden shed. Walk past that, then there is a car park, and then just beyond that there's a little red brick building with a slate roof that says Porthclais Kiosk on it. Walk to the left of that into another tiny little car park with a wooden gate on it, and we'll find beyond there something rather interesting. So go through the gate where there are a couple of benches. One has 1953 on it, ER, I suppose that was the Queen. You go through into quite a scrubby car park with a couple of abandoned boats on the right. Keep going. To the end of that, it looks like you're going nowhere, but keep going. There's a gravelly bit and overgrown plants, and keep going. Come to the end of that little patch of ground. The path winds its way around a little bit where it's quite prickly and brambly, but something through here. There are stinging nettles, so do be careful. Just beyond here is St David's Holy Well, and this is something of a hidden gem. This is where St David was baptised by an Irish bishop called Ailbe, and his name has been anglicised as St Elvis, which I think is quite interesting. And in here is the Holy Well. It's been really dry this summer, so there's very little water in it, but this was the spot where David was baptised. just coming into the ruined St Non's Chapel, and just open the gate. And in front of me there are the ruins of the walls of the chapel, which are incredibly thick. At its highest, it's probably about 6 feet, 6 or 7 feet. Leaned up against the corner is a Celtic cross, which apparently goes back to the 9th century, which is an amazing thing, actually. I'll just go up and touch it. This has such a depth to it. It's a round circle with a simple cross carved on it, so it's very old. And this is the space where St David was born. There's a well just up there behind me. This whole area is quite a spiritual spot, actually. In the field near the chapel there are stones, so it's a chapel within a stone circle. The stones aren't very big, they're only 2 or 3 feet high, but there's quite a lot of them. There's probably about 6 or 8 of them in a big circle around the area. This place, the well, has obviously been a place of spiritual significance for many, many years that probably predates the Christians being here because of the stone circle. It was quite common for the early Celtic Christians just to adopt what was here already, and they've built a church in the middle of the stone circle. That's okay. It was a way of continuity and just saying, yeah, we've got new ways, but they are compatible with the old ways, and I think we can all learn from that. St Non was David's mother, and she gave birth to him here, apparently in a storm, in the site of what is now the ruined chapel. St Non was being hunted by a local king who wanted to kill David because he had had a dream that David would be a great man, and he interpreted that as being someone who would usurp his throne. So Non fled to Brittany because Brittany had such close connections with Cornwall and Wales, an island at the time. So the Irish Sea, in that sense, was the highway of its day, not a barrier as it sometimes is seen today. So she went and fled to Brittany, where she survived and then brought David back. And he did become a great man, but in quite a different way, as a holy man, as a monk and a priest. Behind the well is a statue of Our Lady, of Mary. It's a nice continuity with Our Lady's Island near Rosslare. There aren't many of these statues in Britain, actually, like this. And this does sort of indicate that this is part of a Catholic retreat centre just up the hill. So I'll go down to the well, and I'm going to do something I've been waiting to do. I have with me a bottle of water that I brought from St Mogue's Well in Ferns, and I've been carrying this all the way. Beneath me is the well. There's a stone well with a stone arch over the top, and very clear water with a few flowers and coins and little pebbles beneath. And I'm just going to pour the water from Mogue's Well into St Non's Well and hope the universe doesn't blow up. I'm sure it won't. It's just a nice way of ending the pilgrimage to connect the two places together. Here goes. So I'm just coming past St Non's Well now, and I'm walking up to the chapel of Our Lady in St Non, and it's a reconstruction from the 1930s of a Celtic chapel in the same dimensions as the ruined Celtic chapel a little further down. There are a couple of benches outside. This is a nice place to stop and just think of the walk that we've done before we head into the busyness of the cathedral city. It's just a place to sit and look out over the sea, back over to Ireland. Just think about the things that we've seen and experienced on this beautiful pilgrimage. On the right of the chapel is a stained glass window of St David, and it says, "St David, pray for us," and it just reminded me of the graffiti on the wall in the well house at Oilgate at St David's Well, where it also says, "St David, pray for us." So a nice connection between the two locations in Wales and Ireland. To the left of the altar is a statue of Mary and Jesus, and this is a bit of a giveaway that this actually is a Catholic chapel, which is quite unusual in these parts. And around the walls there are also the Stations of the Cross. Just in front of the statue to Mary is a little area where you can light a candle, and I've just watched some people light a candle and pray for whatever it was that was on their mind. It's a place of refuge. It was a place of refuge for Non and David, and it's a place of refuge for us all before we head off to the city. finally arrived in St David's, and I'm coming into the city, the smallest city in Britain, down the wonderfully named Pig's Foot Lane, where there are a group of stone cottages, a line of stone cottages with a grassy lane in front of it. You get the feeling this hasn't changed in hundreds of years. Towards the end of the lane, we just take a left down to the cathedral itself. What will it feel like when we finally reach the end of our 260 kilometre epic pilgrimage? Well, we're nearly there. We just walk past the sign that goes to the Bishop's Palace and Cathedral and keep straight on because there's a bit of an iconic photograph spot. It's the Instagram spot for St David's Cathedral over on the right, just before the car park at the bottom of the hill. And over to the right is the large wall of the Bishop's Palace. And as we get to the bottom, there in all its glory is the wonderful St David's Cathedral. And I can see over the top of the wall, cathedral spire pointing up into the heavens. And we've arrived. We finally got here. So well done, you've made it. Let's go back up the hill a little bit to the cathedral itself. So our final 200 metres of the journey takes us past another high wall and goes alongside the Bishop's Palace, and then we can see the cathedral in front of us. The Bishop's Palace to the left was once the fanciest B&B in Wales. It was where royals and the aristocracy came on pilgrimage, and they stayed over there courtesy of the bishop. It's a ruin now. That was destroyed during the Reformation, but the cathedral itself survived. So I just go through the gate now, underneath the clock tower. The cathedral has been built and rebuilt over the centuries, and what we see now is back to the 6th century where David had his monastery. Joining the pilgrims on the way in. There are candles to the right of the shrine where people are leaving a candle to pray for someone or something that they've been thinking about on their way. And underneath the shrine are 3 little niches, and on the left is a casket that the bones that were once thought to be St David were housed in, and in the middle there's a Celtic bangy bell, a bell that the Celtic saints would have used to announce their arrival. And to the left there's a little table with prayers, handwritten prayers on it that people have left for St David to pray for us. It reminds me a little bit of St David's Well in Nilegate, back in Ireland. And above the shrine are little sculptures, a shell, a pilgrim shell. There's a leek, reminding us we're in Wales. There's a snake, reminding us of St Patrick banishing the snakes from Ireland. And over on the right there's a boat with pilgrims in coming from Ireland to Wales, like we have, but it's a much smaller boat, the one here. It's a reminder of the connections between the 2 countries. And just going around the back of the shrine, immediately behind it there are 3 much larger niches and 2 more icons, one of St Justinian and one of St Non, who was David's mother. And the niches underneath, in medieval times the pilgrims would arrive, and to get near the relics of St David they would kneel here and even try and get into the little alcoves underneath to get nearer the relics of the saint, to have some spiritual impact, to be close to those relics, to pray for healing, to pray for family members, to pray for themselves. And here we are at the end. And above it there are little cross type niches where people would have pushed their little prayers in to make little offering prayers to St David. Janet Ingram is St David's Cathedral's Education and Pilgrimage Officer, and she was kind enough to give us a guided tour of the shrine and the cathedral.
Icons were put in here in 2012, but we've got a medieval shrine. Icons are sometimes considered to be windows into heaven, and so the iconographer has covered the wooden board, you can hear it's wooden, with clay, and whilst the clay is still wet, gold leaf is laid on the top, and that's going to reflect the light and give that idea that we're looking through into heaven. There's a shape that people use of the triangle, so you sit there looking at Dewi, And Dowie says, I actually get my strength from Christ, and Christ looks back at you. So there's this triangle that people will use to help them meditate, reflect and pray. So we've got Patrick, and his connection here is that he was here before Dowie and then had a vision. Did you see Can't did you?
Yes,
Yes.
we did.
Oh, so did you tell them about Patrick's seat?
We did.
Yeah. So Patrick would have sat there and seen the island of Ireland before he set off from White Sands. There he is depicted with his walking staff. He's on the move. Dowie in the middle, and then St Andrew. We're actually the cathedral church of St Andrew and St David. I guess because when David was here, his original church would have been dedicated to Andrew, because of course he wasn't dedicated to himself. And the iconographer helps us to understand a bit of their story by the way in which she's written it as a prayer. So she's written ideas there. They're all blessing us. They're holding their hands ready to do the sign of the cross and bless us. So giving us a gift. And she's dressed Dowie in robes of an Egyptian monk, because he would have been following that quite austere way, more like the desert fathers, incredibly strict. Bread, water, herbs, and that's it. He was known as a waterman because he stood in water up to his neck to recite the Psalms, and he wouldn't allow his monks to drink beer, so they had water, so he got the nickname Dowie the Waterman. And he's holding the gospel, a clasped gospel that he would have written here at the monastery. Andrew holding a scroll which has Greek on it, telling him to go out into all the world to make disciples. You'll notice that they're barefooted, apart from Andrew, showing that Andrew was an apostle. There at the Last Supper, knew Jesus and, had a conversation with him face to face. But Dowie and Patrick, of course, following in Christ's footsteps without ever having met them in Jerusalem or in the Holy Land. So trying to walk as carefully as they can through life, following in the footsteps of Christ. Underneath we've got the bell, reliquary boxes containing bones. We're not sure whose bones. Above we have the canopy showing heaven and stars. Above that you'll notice there are symbols on the top there. So we've got 3 associated with the stories of Patrick, 3 associated with Andrew, and then the ones in between with Dowie. You'll notice that the middle one is a scallop shell. It's become the symbol of making a pilgrimage. 900 years ago, Pope Calixtus declared that this place was a place of pilgrimage, and if you made 2 pilgrimages to St David's, it was equivalent to making 1 to Rome. In medieval times, pilgrims would have carried these because they would have been offered food, to scoop waters to drink, and then of course when you return home to take that with you to remind you of everything that you had learnt on your pilgrimage. So I was wondering, what is it you've learnt on your pilgrimage, or what is it that's become precious to you as you walk? What small little thing is going to be taken away, tucked in your heart? I have part of a poem written by R.S. Thomas called Somewhere, and it talks about this little precious something that you might take away. As has been said, the point of travelling is not to arrive, but to return home laden with pollen. You shall work up into the honey the mind feeds on. So I wonder what seed of pollen you're going to take home in order that your mind can work on it over the next few days, weeks, years, maybe even. As we leave here, may we walk in the way of Christ, in the path of St David, and all those who have gone before us. May we be joyful, keep the faith, and do the little things. Amen.
So I'm just outside of the cathedral and I'm looking down at the river that flows immediately past the cathedral. Actually, you can probably hear it burbling away, and it reminds me that St David was known as the waterman because he had a very simple life and he would stand in this river, apparently up to his chest, to calm his temptations and to think about God. I'm really tempted by a coffee right now, but I don't think I can calm it, and I'm certainly not going to get into the water. So I'm going to finish and have a cup of coffee in the refectory and end my pilgrimage here. It's been a sheer delight, and thanks for being with me on the way. I'll leave the final words of the audio guide to Bonnie Boo, an Irish pilgrim who was one of the first people to walk the Wexford-Pembrokeshire Pilgrim Way back in 2022.
I found peace, I found clarity, I found faces with thoughts polarity, I found blessings, I found above, I found me, my old true love. I climbed high, I climbed low, I climbed and found my flow. I laughed hard, I laughed cries, I elated past times into the skies. I felt the grass, I felt the breeze, I felt the support as I came to my knees. I heard poets, I heard emotions, I heard hardships and life's devotions. I smelled sunshine, I smelled rainstorms, I smelled hope for beyond the norms, because I believed in the hope, I believed in the faith, I believed in my abundance-fueled state, because we believed, we climbed, we felt, we found, we put one foot in front of the other, laying the ground with stories and ideas of future, present and past, and together a community, an energy that will last.